Alright, so I figured we'd take another look at this today. I haven't really done anything since last night, but the camshaft caused quite the controversy. The clearancing of the cam for the rods to go through there. And this is all stuff to consider when you consider building a stroker motor. Okay, we're putting an 82 crank in here, and these might be clearance a little bit on the heavy side, but I don't want to do it twice. And I've done this, a couple times now. And I've never had a camshaft break, but this is one of the things that you have to do when you build a motor like this with certain parts. Now, if you don't like the way this looks, you can do this on a lathe and it's much nicer, but you still have the integrity of the camshaft getting smaller. You can go to JC, they make a billet cam, and of course it's casted smaller or forged smaller, so the base circle itself down here is smaller. And a roller cam would be another option. But all this stuff increases the cost of the motor. So this is stuff that you'll run in with a Volkswagen. Another option is we could buy a case with a 90 thousandths cam drop, and we wouldn't have to touch the cam because the rods wouldn't come close to it. 78 crank, you don't have to get as drastic as this. If you want to go with the 86 stroke crank, you're gonna be cutting stuff pretty good, or you're gonna be buying a good set of rods. But one guy commented he had a Berg motor, and the cam wasn't cut like that. I have a Berg cam over here on the shelf. It's a 315 Berg, which is a real popular grind for the street. It's there it is right there. It's cut the same way. This cam here has been touched up a little bit. It's almost smaller than the one that I did. It's just it's more precise. So let me show you a scat cam now right from the factory that's clearance for a stroker, or semi-clearanced, okay? And this is all going to depend on, what type of rod you use too. The commenter that made the comment, he said that he had Corella rods in his motor, and Corella rods are very, very small on the cap side. Well, a lot of times in racing we use the jet rod, which is a little bit bigger. And, depending on the size of the rod that you're using, is going to determine how much you're going to have to cut out of here, and the stroke of the crank, of course. And that cam that I bought was basically like this. It was supposed to be for a stroker. This is a Volkswagen billet right there. I hate to say billet, it's a casting because it's not a billet, but it's a Volkswagen piece that somebody's reground and made into a performance cam. And this is quite large. It's made for a 69 stroke. It's not really designed to have the stroke increased on the crankshaft and worry about the rod passing through here. I had a couple people ask me about the strength. This is a cam that was in a motor for quite a while. It actually wiped out. This lobe here is starting to go, and the cam never failed. They hardly ever fail. You see a cam break every once in a while, and usually it's the guy that's running the K-motion springs or a lot of spring pressure. Here's a brand new scat cam, and this one's the same way. It's squared off from the factory, and you might have to go in there and touch that up depending on what stroke you're running and stuff like that. But that's how the cam should have come when I ordered it, but it came for a non-stroker application, so I'm having to go in there and clearance all that out. But here's a 315, and it's about the same. This came out of a Corella rod motor, so I don't know. Maybe you had a Porsche rod journal crank. They're a little tighter on the swing. You still have the 82 stroke, but everything's more compact because the rod's a lot shorter. So the length of the rod really matters too, I guess. But it really shouldn't, because the rod, the clearance problem, like this is a bolt issue where the rod comes up through the cylinder. Our arm's a lot longer now when we add stroke. So you can buy these cases, I believe, with a 90 thousandths cam drop. So if you're going to get crazy, with a stroke, you can go as far as 90, I think 90 millimeter on the stroke. This is an 82. And, when you get big on the stroke, you got to drop the cam. I think it's 100 or 90. I forget. I'll have to get on the scooters. There's some ARPM cases down there. Knowles got a couple of cam where the cases or the cam is dropped in the case. And this is stuff that you get into when you want to add displacement. I mean, we're dealing with a piece here that's made for 50 horsepower, and we're trying to squeeze, 180 out of it. So, you got to move some stuff around. And this is the same when you do a big block Chevrolet stroker. You're going to relieve the block, and you're gonna clearance stuff, not necessarily the cam, because you don't have that issue. But eventually they solved the problem by making an aftermarket block, just like in the American car world. That's why you got the little M and the dart blocks and all the aftermarket stuff that's available, because they moved the camshaft so you can run a bigger camshaft core. The bigger you can make this camshaft core and the bigger you can make the nose of the cam, the more power you can make. And that's something that they're learning in the American car world. That's why they go so big on the camshaft core. I've had people ask me, why do you go to a 55 millimeter cam? Well, it's because you can have a really wide nose, you can pull some of the duration out of the grind, and it has a lot of open time, so it makes big power. And you can see this cam sort of built that way. It's got a really wide nose on it. But this isn't going to be an issue as far as the cam braking. I haven't seen one breaking in the 30 years that I've been doing it. I worked for Scooter for 15 years down there, and we raced pretty hard, and we never broke a camshaft. Every once in a while you'll break a cam gear, but not if you buy the good cam gears. Like I said, the only issue we'll have with here is the lobe wiping out on this, and that's just something that comes with wear. And all this grinding and stuff is something that you wouldn't have to do if you built like a 1915 or you stayed with a mild stroke on the crank. And I guess everything gets stressed out when you stroke a motor. Everything has to be moved to the extreme. For example, here's the piston that we're going to be using, and you can see this is the oil landing right here. Here's the pin. You can see how close that pin is to the oil landing. Here's a 69 stroke stock piston. You can see how far the pin is from the bottom of the oil ring. So the more stroke you add, of course you have to move the pin up in the piston, or you have to have a mile long barrel, and then you'd have to have a really custom piston made. And you get into different rod ratios, and how much dwell you want at top dead center and all that good stuff. And that's where building motors really gets expensive, when you start customizing a motor for different applications. And I tell people that you can build a Chevrolet motor much cheaper, and they chuckle at me, but it's true. Even with the cheaper parts that are available today, I mean, you take for instance this case is $950 to your door, and then you're going to have to do some work to it. We've already had to move every one of the oil holes over to the bearing. Okay, so that's about all we've had to do to it. But you'd have to pay somebody to do that, or you'd have to have that done, so you'd probably be at the $1,000 or maybe a little over mark by the time you had the oil mod done. And if you didn't do that, it's going to cost you $950, because you're going to blow the motor up. Then you got a camshaft. That's $100. Lifters are, just say $100, because these are two-piece light-ass lifters. You got your timing set here. That's another $120, $130 for the good timing set. Another $80 for the oil pump, $60. You got the crank. Cheap crank's $300. A good crank's about $650, $800, depending on what you buy. Whether you want a flange crank or a wedge mated or a standard 8-dowel crank. And if we buy a good set of power rods, that's $800. And it just goes on and on. There's just so many versions and ways that you can build these in different power levels that it's endless. And that's why people love these motors. And I've been playing with these for a long time, and I fell in love with them right out of high school. I met Scooter, and I worked down there, and I washed parts for about 4 years before I even touched a motor, other than cleaning the parts. And eventually, after I worked there for about 10 years, he let me start building engines. And we didn't have too many comebacks at that shop. I can't really remember too many. Occasionally you get a cam that goes bad, but that's something that's out of your control. And that's something that never used to happen. We never used to have camshaft issues back in the 80s and the early or late 70s. You would never lose a camshaft. I don't care if it was a 110 or FK89, they just didn't go bad. And You know, we had Wiseman lifters. They were nothing special. They were real heavy. And, you know, as they cheapen the process up and they take the Rockwell hardness off the cam and the lifter, we went through a spell where the lifters and the cams wiped out and they blamed it on the oil. And, I mean, you know, it could have been the oil. I don't know. But, you know, if you have a Volkswagen, there was that period that we went through there where there was a learning curve where we had to, you know, be aware of the zinc that was pulled out of the oil by the government and stuff like that. And that almost killed the sport because a lot of people were really discouraged when you spend this kind of money and the cam wipes out. You know, you have to fix it because it's just metal going through the motor. But I would say that's the #1 failure point of the cam, is it wiping out. And, you know, I'm not an engineer, but I would, I've been around a couple of them down there at Scooters, and I don't know, I think we increased the surface area here somewhat, and may have made this stronger. I'm not sure. You know, the cam is a cast piece to begin with, so if you drop it from here, it'll break. Here, let me demonstrate. I used to love to do this when I worked at Scooters. We'd take motors apart. Oh, there's a shitty 4-volt cam. Well, we'd take motors apart, and I used to love to, you know, about here, you gotta drop it nice and flat. And you see it pops right off, never to be used again, stock cam. So here's the construction of a cam, and you can see, like I said, sometimes you get the failure right there at the slot because of the way it's constructed and casted. It's sort of a shitty part anyway. You can see how you know, even the German piece, it's very rough cast metal. So there's the camshaft there. It's very hard to break like this though. It will snap off at the end, but as far as trying to break it in half, yeah, it's pretty hard. It is brittle at both ends though, where the gear attaches. That's about the weakest point on a cam. So I've seen the snouts break off there, you know, and it's bolted on a performance application where it's riveted on as stock. And this is you know, the average performance cam is ground off of a Volkswagen blank. So there you go, that's kind of material you're dealing with. So, but you know, once you support that in the motor with all those cam bearings, it's pretty hard pressed to break. You know, you have support area, support area, support area. So it makes it very stout when the case is bolted together. So I hope that answered some of the questions on, you know, the cam. I'm gonna have to get over to Knowles. We'll throw one up on the lathe and I'll turn it down. You can see this one here is barely touched. Well, it's touched for sure, but if you look at it compared to the 315 that's not cut there, or the scat, that's about factory if you ordered a you know, a stroker cam. So you have to relieve it. The rod's got to go through there, and you know, we're using an H-beam rod, so if you were going to try to use the Volkswagen rod, you'd even, you know, you'd have to have that kind of room. And I sort of clearanced this off that 120, and that's probably why it's a little, you know, more relieved, because it's basically, I could probably put a Volkswagen rod in here and spin it through there and I'd have room. We're using the H-beam rod. The rod bolts on the opposite side. So, or it's a lot smaller cap, I should say. You don't have all this stuff to deal with. I'll show you the comparison here. So you can see if you were using a stock rod how you would have to have more room. So here's the H-beam. You can see it's pretty tight. And this one's a little bigger. You know, the bolt's a little bigger. And it's not longer, it just looks that way. It's just got more girth. Even the cap has more area on the back of it. And that's what likes to hit where the cylinder is at when you add stroke. So I'm going to leave that bag off and put those gears on so we can install this crank later tonight. And I got to build this 1600 that's floating around over here. I need to wash all this stuff again. It's completely filthy. But again, there's that 315. You can see. That's how Bergs usually come. You know, they're usually like the Scat. And sometimes you can pay to have it turned down depending on what rod you're going to use. But that's how, if you order a stroker cam, that's how it's going to come. It'll already have the flat started. And you might have to enhance them a little bit, but you have a reference point when you order them this way, instead of just starting completely like this. And that's what we did. And I ordered it like this and got it like this. So, you know, it's one of those deals. Do you throw the camshaft in the garbage and not use it, or do you just clearance it? And, you know, I've done plenty that way where I've never had an issue. So I feel real confident that the cam won't break. And somebody asked me what car we're going to put this in. And being that, you know, it's a little more snotty now than it was originally going to be. It's supposed to be a low compression motor, but nobody was interested in it. I'm going to throw it in my race car. I'll pull this out. This car is almost 1,480 pounds without me in it. And I weigh right under 200 pounds. So it's a good representative of, you know, what the motor is capable of. And this car's already got a really good tranny and everything, you know, to be able to drop the hammer at like, you know, 7,500 and it won't break the tranny. So I'll have an ET slip to go with the motor, because a lot of guys, you know, they'll build the motor and tell you how powerful it is. And there's only one way to eliminate all the bullshit, and that's go to the track and run it, you know. And that's one thing about this channel. We don't ever build a motor and not test it. And guys that I've built motors for on YouTube, they know that my shit's good because they're still driving their cars. And when I build a motor for you, believe me, the quality will be as high as it can possibly be with the parts that are available. And I am willing to buy any part that you want, you know, so the expense level is completely up to you. The sky is the limit when you build these. There's a lot of options. And it's something basically you got to sit down and talk about what you really want. I know Mike Freddy, he's sent an email or two to Andrea. I need to call him up. He wants to build a turbo motor for his bug. And Mike, you can take a look at that road to the 5-second pass with Noel. That's, you know, if you want a turbo motor, that's a real good combination to build. It's 82 by 94. It's got autocraft cylinders with Potter rods and a scat crank, flanged. Because when you start making turbo power, it wants to spit the flywheel off if it's not, you know, attached well. So there's a limit there to what you can make with dowel pins. And then you have to move to the Chevy style flange crank in the back, which requires more machine work because you have to machine the back of the case. It takes a different type seal, and all that stuff is hard to make a price on until we talk about what you exactly want. So I really need to sit down and talk with Mike on the phone and talk to him. And you know, Noel's car weighs 1,550 pounds. When we race it at the track, it's pretty much a pro mod car, but it still has to weigh 1,550 with the intercooler. And it runs 590s at 120 in the eighth. And that's 82 by 94 motor, which is a 2275, 6, whatever. And you can make pretty good power with small motors. And you know, the bigger the motor is, the better the cylinder heads have to be. So that's something that you need to remember. The cylinder heads for this motor were right about $1,150, and the heads that we use on the turbo motor they're 2 steps down from what we're going to use on this aspirated setup. So you can go a little cheaper on the cylinder heads. You still have to have the good valve springs, hardware, the travel for the big cam and all that stuff, but the port can be smaller. So there's a million combinations. It just depends on what you want. I consider this, you know, pretty much a mean street motor. I don't know if you ordered like a CB Performance kit. They're set at about 10.5 to 1 compression. And, you know, with 48s and a set of their heads, they run pretty damn good. And this motor should duplicate that. I bought the camshaft from them. I had it ground a little special. And I bought their lifters. I bought their cylinder heads. And I bought their Potter style rockers. And you know, this is a pretty decent motor, but I wouldn't want to, you know, throw a turbo on here and race it. It's a good street motor. Anything higher than this power level, I'd want to, you know, go better quality with the crankshaft and give it a VW crankshaft that had counterweights welded on it, or buy a scat crankshaft. Both would be stronger than what we're using here, I do believe. Some people might argue that with me. I don't know how strong an MP crank is, but just things that I've seen from assembling this motor, it's not probably something that you'd want to try to make a whole lot of power with and not expect it to fail. So But there are parts you can buy and have really good luck. I mean, you know, the motor is one of the things that we least mess with on Noel's car. We, you know, basically it's tune-up, timing, boost curve, and braking the tranny. So those are the three things that we work on. And the power of the engine, we leak it and make sure our compressor is good. And that's basically all the motor is an air pump, you know. This controls how much air you let into the motor. The cylinder head enhances that, but the cam's the heart, and the cylinder head can trick the engine a little bit, but only a certain amount. And once you have airflow, you need camshaft to open the valve and take advantage of the airflow, the extra port that you've got. So, like I said, we're going to run 48 IDAs on here, so a lot of guys probably wouldn't consider that a street motor. If you're a Volkswagen guy, true to heart, 48s are what you want to have. It's like the Passage, I don't know. I remember back in '79, I got my first set in like 1980, and I don't think I slept with them before I put them on the car for a little while. And I love mine. I drove it on the street for years when I was a kid, until I was about 27 years old. And I never had an issue. Like I said, you have to jet them to the weather every once in a while, but I think they're great carburetors. And I don't know much about Gallardos, IDFs, any of that stuff. Anybody has questions about that stuff, I sort of refer them over to Easy Jeezy. You know, I like IDAs and Cadrons. You know, if you can't afford the IDAs, Cadrons are pretty good. And those are my selection of carburetors there, you know. I have a sort of a narrow window for carburation. And of course, if you're going to turbocharge, you know, Holley 4-barrels always work really well. And I prefer those over side drafts. So some guys like the side drafts, the 2-barrels. But if you have a 2-barrel on your turbo car, you can make it go much faster with a bigger carburetor. And this is a 750 with the top cut off and blended down. You know, this is probably about 800 CFM maybe. And I think Holleys are a little underrated on the CFM from the factory. But this car has been the fastest mile an hour. I had a carburetor that a friend of mine, you know, it was on his shelf at his shop, and he's like, oh, it's a piece of shit. And I took it, and it was a 3-barrel Holley, and it's a very rare carburetor, very hard to find. Apparently it's a NASCAR piece. It's 930 CFM, and this car went 152 miles an hour with that carburetor on there. So always on the hunt for one of those 3-barrel Holleys. I think they were 830 or 930 CFM. And it just had 2 pipes in the back of it with 1 big barrel and then 2 barrels in the front. And you talk about a screamer, man. I took the carburetor off the shelf, and I was able to go down to Bailey's. That's a supply house here in Orlando. And they used to be a Holley distributor. And they actually had a kit on the shelf. And that thing flew. And of course, after it ran really good, you know, you needed the carburetor back. So anyway. So it always happens like that, you know, you make something fast and then somebody's got to have it. Trying to go through the new stuff here and put this somewhere. This cabinet's a freaking mess, and I think I'm going to go buy one more cabinet and separate the used stuff from the new stuff. So it stays looking like new stuff, you know. Alright guys, have a good day. Push the record button. Don't forget to go out in the garage and make a video. Do something. It's been good seeing some of you guys get out in the garage. And I want to say thanks to Easy Jeezy for making the videos that he's been making. And if you haven't checked those out, go over there. It's a good change. He's trying to you know, tune some of us up and help us get healthy. And sometimes, you know, we got to tune our engines up, and sometimes we got to tune ourselves up. And I'm pretty much overdue for a major tune-up. And there's some guys online that are helping me with that. And there's some guys that have helped me in the past too. Nexon, I mean, he doesn't watch my videos anymore, but he helped me. He got me to kick the McDonald's and got rid of my titties. And that was a couple of years ago. I haven't seen him on the tubes in a while. But every once in a while you need a little bit of encouragement from people in your circle. And I know that I definitely need some work, so I'm looking to some of my friends to help me get back in shape. So that's where we're at. That's what we're doing. We're going to come out here and work on this a little bit, I got to make a run to the parts store and pick up a few more little items, and then we'll seal this together and fire it up and go have some fun.